So currently we've got this tiny A kind of appearing, floating around the page somewhat. So how do we actually style this up? Well, again, if we go to the P5 reference guide, again, if we go to typography, there's a lot of things in here that we can actually use to style this up. So let's go about doing that. So the first thing we're going to go to is we're going to go back to our script.js, because this is where we're drawing the text. And I'm going to add some space in here above text. Now, the reason I'm doing it before text is I want to style it and then write it to the page. So the first thing we're going to do is actually give it some text size. Now, the final version of the text size I'm going to do is actually text size, and in brackets, 800. Now, it seems like a lot, but the A is quite small in Space Grotesque. So what we should see now is this kind of A going off the canvas. At the moment, obviously, the canvas is at the wrong place, so we kind of want to shift it down the page a little bit and kind of position it not at 100 by 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually add a text align. So I want this in the middle of 100 and 100. So the next thing I'm going to do is text align. Again, if I go here, we can see text aligns in here. I want to make it center and center. So basically make it right in the middle of this coordinate. So text align is in the center in capitals and center in both directions. So what we should see now is this A move. So the middle of this A is roughly 100 and 100 from this top corner of the canvas. But of course, we don't want it at 100 and 100. We want to shift it over into the middle of the canvas. So the middle of the canvas is roughly 300, 300, half of 600 in each way. So let's just see how that looks. 300, 300. So now what we should see. Now, the reason this looks a little bit low is just because it's a lowercase a. We might want to move it up the page a little bit just to optically balance this a little bit better. So to do that, I'm just going to shift it up in the kind of Y direction. Just going to remove a little bit from 300, maybe something like 240. Let's see how that looks. That feels a little bit more like it's in the middle of this canvas. Again, we'll kind of play around with this a little bit later if it doesn't look completely right. And again, we don't want this in black as well. We want to kind of fill it in a different color. And again, if I go back to my reference guide, this isn't in typography now because it's all to do with how the text looks. This is all to do with color. And what I want to do is fill it in a certain color. The color is obviously this yellow color that I'm using. So what we're going to do is before this, I'm going to add a fill to this text. What color? Well, I've got it in my style.css. I've also got it in my project document as well. So in here, I'm just going to take this in. This needs to be in quotes. The reason it needs to be in quotes is this hash F3C043 isn't really a thing in JavaScript. We need to put it in some quotes to make it not a JavaScript word. So what we should see now is something that looks like this. So we have this A being in the middle of the page. The one thing that we're missing, of course, is this is currently in the wrong typeface. This is in Arial, but we want it to be in this different typeface, this Space Grotesque medium. So we need to load the font in first. So to do this, we're going to go back to our reference guide, and in the reference guide, we'll go to typography. We want to load this font in. How do we do this? Well, load font needs to be in preload. We don't have preload in right now, so we need to do this next. So we're going to go into here. We're going to kind of follow these instructions a little bit. So first thing we're going to do is add some space at the top. We need to let something equal font. Now I've made the word font up. This is just could be called typeface, for instance. But for now, we just want this to be accessible in this box and any other box that we use. Basically the whole script. We also want to add in here a preload function. So we run preload, then setup, then draw. So in here, we're going to add a function called preload, round brackets, curly brackets. What do we want to do with preload? Well, we want the font to be loaded. So this font needs to be equal to the loaded font. Load font, and then in brackets, round brackets, we're going to take the name of this file. So the name of the file is space grotesque medium. So in quotes, space grotesque medium, and I think it's OTF again. So let's just double check. .otf, yes it is. So now what we can do is actually use this font within setup and draw. So I'm going to close that. So again, we've got, how do we use this? The text font is my font. Now my font is the preloaded font from up here. So now what we can do, before we actually add this text, text font, and then we're going to tell it to do something. Which text font? Well, the font that we just preloaded. So now what we should see on our page is this single A on its own. Again, we can move this around. It's in the right typeface as what we have from here. But what we want to do next is start to kind of clone this and stamp this around the page.